Welcome to Capital Connections. Capital is one of the UK's first people-led mental health organisations. For over 28 years, we have brought together people with services and professionals to improve support, influence design and deliver training shaped by real experience. We are an independent peer-led charity with more than 300 members. Our work is led by people with lived experience through shared learning, workshops, training, community spaces and independent forums. From leading peer-led services to establishing an independent lived experience advisory group for West Sussex, to gathering the voices of people affected by addiction through the West Sussex Drug and Alcohol Partnership, our role is consistent, ensuring lived experience informs decisions at every level. This podcast explores health and well-being in Sussex through real stories, insight and reflection, giving space to lived experience voices. This is Capital Connections.
Okay, so today we're joined by Alex from Sussex University, who has just completed her Masters entitled Challenging Stigma by Doing the Opposite, Peer-Led Organisations and Power Relations, in which she was awarded a distinction. So I met with Alex when she emailed Capital as she wanted to work alongside a peer-led organisation, and she also disclosed that she had her own lived experience. So welcome, Alex. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about you and why you decided to work with Capital on your dissertation?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Sarah. So yeah, as Sarah said, I've been working with Capital for about a year now, which is amazing that it's been this long. Completed my master's in power, participation, and social change from the Institute of Development Studies at Sussex University. And I studied participatory action research, which is a research methodology where the research is done with people rather than on people, with the goal of people liberating themselves or solving problems that affect their lives. That's the word I'm looking for. So we, throughout the research, over the course of a few months, we studied how stigma operates for people that have drug or alcohol misuse issues, and then we also examined how peer-led organizations can challenge stigma. So I chose to work with Capital primarily because they were a peer-led organization, and they're independent. So my professional background is that I'm from Canada, and I worked in drug and alcohol services as well as homelessness services, primarily as an outreach worker. And a lot of what I did was helping people with complex health and social problems navigate healthcare and social systems that they relied on. And so working alongside these people often with complex addiction, physical and mental health issues, I was witness to a lot of the challenges that they encountered when they were trying to access those services. And a lot of the problems that I witnessed, I viewed them that they were because the policies and programs didn't meet people's needs. They weren't designed with those people in mind. And so, yeah, as an outsider, it appeared that the programs were just not designed with the lived experience of the people that they were aimed to serve. And I think that's often common, that it's written by people who've gone to university and studied policy, but don't have any lived experience of the policy that it's being written about. So for this reason, I didn't want to work with an organization like with the NHS or a formal institution, but an organization that was really led by the people for whom it was designed to serve. And I also wanted to learn how to center lived experience in policy and program design. And I ended up finding Capital on a list of user-led organizations. And so when I read about their work and how they've been doing co-production and training and really trying to improve the mental health services for almost 30 years, I was really interested to work with them. And so just given that like background of what they've done, I thought this might be a really good match. So I reached out and proposed doing some sort of research together. Sort of originally the idea was around creating new like positive narratives around mental health that challenge stigmatizing ones, because that was definitely something from my own personal lived experience as somebody who's been stigmatized. So yeah, so really the main reason was because Capital was peer-led, so all the people there that work there, volunteer, have some sort of lived experience. And even though, like, I also worked in the formal mental health sector in Canada, and also just witnessed how, they might say the values were that we cared about everyone, but even as an employee, like, my mental health wasn't fully supported all the time, which I just found really ironic because I worked in mental health, but that was not afforded to me, which is a whole other conversation. But yeah,
But yeah, we
really,
understand that.
even if when you can put all the words that inclusive and participatory and trauma informed, but that doesn't always mean that it's put into practice, which I think something Capital actually does. And so so that's a little bit about my background and why I chose Capital.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks, Alex. Just a little bit, I think you talked a little bit about the process, but it'd be lovely to hear you to go into a little bit more about the process of how we got there and how you achieved this.
I think specifically the reason I had contacted you is because I had seen that you were working on I think it was more that your title was lived experience lead, and I was like, okay, this is probably the person to get in touch with.
It's a great title. I really like it. Yeah.
And so I had sent a sort of introductory email, and then I guess the way that action research methodology is, the idea, as opposed to traditional research where, like, I come in as the expert and, I'm like, I want to study stigma and this is my research question and this is what I want to do. That's not what action research does. The action research is almost like organic, that it often, when it does happen, it comes out of an existing problem of being like, okay, we have this thing in our organization, but, like, how do we address it? I had proposed an idea, which was sort of introductory, and then Sara and I, and then Lydia from the Lived Experience Action, the advisory group, had met a few times, and
That's right.
I shared my experience, my background. They explained to me what Capital did, and we sort of were trying to find something that would fit for Capital, because, again, I wasn't trying to come in and invent the wheel, but actually just trying to sort of work alongside them with something that might come up. And so naturally in conversation, it came up that Capital was, they were working on the drug and alcohol partnership, but then specifically something that they were wrestling with was the community fund, and that there was like positive and negative feedback. There are people in the voluntary sector in West Sussex that thought it was a great idea, and of course, there were people within the council that were also supportive, but then you had negative feedback and mixed feedback, I should say, because some of the feedback concern about people's recovery, and that was very genuine, and I completely understand why, and I think that is really important. But then there were also people who sort of held what I think is a stigmatizing view about people who have lived experience of drug or alcohol use, that, like, you can't give them funding because they're untrustworthy. It's very right. And so
I don't think they were even coming from that place, were they? I think it was, and that's why we wanted to explore it in a way, because they were like, we don't have that view, but we kind of understand why people might. We don't think it's right, but it's worth kind of exploring it, isn't it, from every angle?
Which I think is a testament to you as an organization, that instead of just continuing with your plan, oh, okay, well, we don't disagree with it, but it's like, no, we actually want to have those conversations and ask questions, because it can be an educational point too. Because I think one of the things that I learned, but I guess I kind of already knew this, but that if you look at where stigma occurs for people who have drug and alcohol, it most often occurs in healthcare. And that part of that is because it's a health issue, so they have to engage with the healthcare system. But
yes,
it just
difficult.
Shows to you that even though it's a health issue, we still don't have, there's still stigmatizing views within the healthcare and voluntary sector. So sort of what we were saying, that's the problem that we realized was something that Capital was struggling with, and that it might be a good thing to explore. And so we sort of originally thought, okay, because you guys had come up with a partnership agreement form, and we're sort of trying to formulate, okay, how can we create some sort of support system for these people who maybe have never received funding before and are wanting to run a peer program, which I think is great, because that's the whole point of the thing. What it had come from West Sussex community members saying we need peer programs. So it just makes sense to me that you would encourage people who've never done it before. But I digress. So yeah, Capital was trying to figure out how do we support these people? How can we show that, no, this can be successful? So that was where we started. And we sort of initially, I think, thought we might come up with like a specific support program or a specific form that had different things, but it ended up sort of being more an exploration of how stigma operates. So a lot of what I studied in my degree was understanding how power works and how power can either be used to dominate people and oppress people and take people's rights away, but then it can, on the flip side, also be used to achieve social justice and to give power back to people and to empower them. So
and I think that's fascinating, actually. And that slide that you have to demonstrate that, I think, is really fascinating, because I don't think I'd ever looked at it in that way, actually. So I think that's really a good way of demonstrating how power is, it's not always bad.
No.
It's sometimes very appropriate, but it's how it's done and how it filters down to empower the person. Yeah.
So that's sort of how we started the process. And then over the course of a few months, we had focus groups, and we would, from our personal lived experience, from professional experience, from people's lived experience with accessing services, that sort of thing, we examined how it operates and sort of come to understand how stigma really is a form of power over. So it's a dominating power, and that stigma is actually driven by power. An example I like to give is that, people say in a inpatient psychiatric unit, who have maybe they are unhappy with their care, or as a group of people, they talk about amongst themselves about how they don't like the doctors, and maybe they say negative things, and they say mean things or demeaning things, but those patients don't have any power over the doctors. They don't have any ability to fire them or reduce their work schedule or do anything. So they don't have any power over the doctors. They might view them as negative and have all these ideas about them, but without power, they can't do anything. On the flip side, it is the doctors that have power over the psychiatric patients.
Yeah.
And which is why Capital exists, because of the framework of mental health care, that there's a lot of power that is used. There's a lot of power that comes from the Mental Health Act and doctors being able to prescribe or dictate how and where people should live. We really studied and understood that that stigma in terms of people who use drugs or have misuse with alcohol or drugs is that it's a way that people's lives can be altered because it affects their ability to participate in private and public life. And that was one of the things that came up, was people talking about how, because of their substance use and the stigmatization, not being able to be in family spaces or not being able to work. And so a lot of the things that the personal experiences that people brought up is reflected in the existing literature, that stigma most often appears for people who use drugs in housing, in employment, in healthcare. So people struggle to get housing because of the perception that people are untrustworthy or unsafe and those sorts of things. And so we sort of really came to examine that and understand how stigma operates. And then at the same time, seeing how and why peer engagement is really important is because what I think is that it, as sort of the title of my thesis or my dissertation, is that it does the opposite. So peer engagement does the opposite of stigma in that it includes people. Instead of separating people, it brings people in. It is giving people an opportunity to show who they are. And I think it was Mark in one of our focus groups says that peer engagement, it's like empowering, or it gives people power that was taken away from them.
Yeah.
So over the course of several months, we did focus groups and really came to understand. And then also just what also was illuminated was just the work that Capital does, and showing how, what I think, and sort of my conclusion of the dissertation is that one of the reasons why peer engagement is important is because it can empower people, and it does the opposite of stigma by trusting people and including them, and essentially saying, yeah, we believe in you, as opposed to the opposite, of, which is stigma, which is that you're not supposed to be included, and that based on stereotypes, it's justified to separate you and then discriminate and you know, there's a perception that it's okay to treat people who use drugs or alcohol poorly because, well, you know, we should treat them poorly so that then they stop using. But we've
stop their bad behavior. Yes.
Tried that for like 100 years, drug prohibition, and it hasn't worked. So in my view, the solution is to empower people. But yeah, so we engaged in some focus groups, did participatory activities. It was very much like led by the group. We had 3 Capital staff, and then we also included 2 members who are also on the oversight committee for the Drug and Alcohol Partnership.
So what would you say has worked well throughout that whole process? You know, obviously it's worked very well because you ended up, you know, how it's ended up, and it's a great document. And just to say, we will put that, if it's not already on Capital's website, it will be going on in the next couple of weeks so that people can read the full dissertation. It is really, really good and it's fascinating. But yeah, what would you say worked well with the whole process, I guess?
Sort of 2 things. I think one, the collaborative nature. So we did a co-inquiry, which is a sort of research process where a group collectively researches on a problem that affects them. And so I think the collaborative nature, and then also of bringing in our own lived experience, that just helped the process on. Like, of course, the information that we got and the knowledge that we generated was amazing, but I think because everyone in the group had a shared lived experience and just has a shared understanding of, I think, like what it's like to live in the world. Again, of course, I sort of facilitated things, but I think having a very different group of people, because we had people who, you know, from Duncan, who has and Duncan and Sara, who had whole professions in the mental health field for years, to having members who maybe don't have that experience but have really rich and lived experience. I think the sort of collaborative nature and working together, as opposed to me coming in as the expert, really helped.
Absolutely.
Life happened. I, at one point, had really bad anxiety and had to pause the process. And because there was a shared understanding of mental health, I didn't feel worried about that sort of at the beginning of the process, because I felt I had to be the professional, and I need to sort of like know everything. I was very nervous at the beginning. And then by the point that I started to get really anxious, like I had developed relationships and we knew each other. And so I was able to safely say, you know, hey, I just need to take a pause right now. And you guys just received me with support. It wasn't like, oh, this person doesn't know what they're doing or any of those things. It was just understanding. And so I think that really helped.
Absolutely.
And I think that it could have gone in other ways. Again, like as a student researcher, I felt pressure to sort of know what I was doing, but there was a lot of grace and understanding that this was the first time I've done this. I've never done this before. So I think that really worked. And then also just, we all come from a shared lived experience. Like I know you and Duncan and we've all worked in mental health, and then Mark as well. So we all have that sort of, I think the lived experience piece really helps, whether it's our lived experience or our personal, that there was just that understanding. And so we're sort of all speaking the same language. Like some of us knew what it's like to work for the NHS or more formal healthcare institutions, to all the way to really small charities, and understand the different sides of it. And so I think, that collaborative nature and just really letting everybody to be able to share whatever experience was important. I think that helped, and not sort of like dictating what people can do.
I think, for me, I think we talked about trust a lot, didn't we? Trust was something that came up an awful lot throughout our conversations in various different ways. I think we commented how much we use that word. And I think for all of us, when I was saying absolutely it wasn't about you, I think we all built a really trusting relationship, which we had to do in order to complete that work, didn't we? I know quite a lot was disclosed throughout the whole thing, because everyone felt comfortable to do that. And I think that was really good. I know you were having some things going on for yourself. You needed to take some time away. And I think we all recognise the importance. And I do recognise the importance in doing that with whatever you're doing, actually. When things are going on, sometimes you just have to pull away for it, don't you, and have that space. And look, you've come back and look at what amazing work you've done. It's just been, I think that was absolutely necessary. And I think that goes on in this work generally. I think I found, people sometimes can't be working for whatever reason. They have a lot of other stuff going on. Do you know what I mean? So sometimes people have to pull away from a bit. And I think we have to understand that's the way things should work, actually. Should always work like that. Yeah.
And the rest of the world, that trust and flexibility isn't always there. You would just be like, you're not here. Okay, we're going to find somebody else.
I'll move on. Yeah.
That's how life was. And it wasn't just me that was experiencing, there was one of the members was at one point stressed because of changes to her disability.
Absolutely. Yeah.
One person that we had really hoped would join us was dealing with homelessness. And so
yes, exactly.
Us because life happened. And so that collaborative nature and trust. And I think the trust piece is really interesting that you bring that up, because that is, I think, so key to how Stigma operates, is that like, you don't have like the part of the power thing is that you're not trusted. And so by trusting each other and knowing that we're all here with good intentions, and even if we're not able to show up, that doesn't mean we're not engaged. We just have life. And so I think that's a big learning too, is that if you're going to do this kind of research and work with people with lived experience, you have to be flexible and understand that you might have a meeting that nobody shows up to. And so you have to build that into your process, that you essentially need more time, like more time that you think it would. And some people might give up and not want to do it. But I think we also discussed this in working in mental health. It's a very challenging field, and it's not something that happens like, oh yeah, okay, just go to treatment and then your life is okay, you're good. Like, it's very complex. And if you work in this field, you have to have patience and flexibility, because that's the reality of people's lives. And it's not being like, I must be patient because it's for me. It's because that's part of the work. And so I think that's a big learning thing, that if you're going to work in peer organizations, like, it takes more time. There needs to be more understanding. You may have to have a 15-minute break so that people can not be stuck in, maybe you're talking about a really difficult topic, and so you need a break so people aren't stuck in their trauma or whatever that is. So I think collaborative, and then also just having work with flexibility and trust that it will get there.
I think that takes us into the challenges quite nicely, some of the challenges, because I think you're right, Alex. I know I've noticed some of those challenges with working with people, with multiple disadvantages, and we've had lapses go on in this project. I'm not want to put anyone out, but we have, we've had homelessness, like you've mentioned, we've had mental health dips, and that's something we tried to create with this community partnership form with the people that were having not accepting some of the funds, was just very gently like, what do we do if? So we don't, just like, how can we help you if you have a mental health wobble? I think was one of them. If homelessness occurs, if, any of those things that might become a problem, how can we support you? So we're really looking at it from a supportive angle. These things can happen, and they do happen. So it's like you said, it's how do you kind of balance that? So so that's definitely can be a challenge. So any other challenges or barriers or key learning points that you've taken from this work?
Yeah. I think what I had noted was definitely what we already brought up, was that just the challenges were really mostly related to life and the reality of running research, that there's multiple people involved, and that, people get sick and show up. But I think especially working, we know from the research that even if you stop using substances, that the complexities and the consequences can live with you for the rest of your life. So those are physical consequences or health issues, but also just like the stigma about substance use, it continues even if people are not using anymore. And that was so we know that's in the research. And then that was apparent. It was just, people having to deal with challenges. And so, as I sort of already said, I think it's about how life comes at you. And, in some, I think, contexts, people would just move on, right? Just like, okay, you're not on the train, we're going to keep moving. But we paused the train. The train waited for everybody because we wanted everybody to get on. And that, I think that's the key, that it was about being participatory and inclusive and doing it in the way that was worked best for everybody, instead of me just saying, okay, this is the train, I've designed it this way and you need to get on. Because if I did that way, that's completely antithetical to my entire point of doing research.
Yeah.
Try and understand and learn how you be inclusive. And I think the key is flexibility, and that like we try to really, I think, make things like, this is the system, like, oh, you have to come into the system, but like we know, but like, okay, yeah, maybe 5 out of 10 people are the same, but there's still 5 people that are different and need those services to fit their needs. So I think, like, in a perfect world, we would have lived experience and co-production in everything, because it just makes sense, you know. I think about, I worked in drug services. When were our clinics open? They were open Monday to Friday, like 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. when it serves us as workers.
Absolutely.
You know, if you are homeless and you're maybe living with addiction, like, especially in the community I grew up with, the messaging I heard from people was that it was safer to sleep during the day and be awake at night. So it's really difficult to go to your health clinic when it's only open during the day. And so I think that's just an example of how
That's a very good example.
we just design
Yes.
services that fit us, the workers, when really it's so silly that it should not be that way.
No, absolutely. And I'm sure it would work. You know, as we know, this is a whole system reform, and I think we're probably talking worldwide here, but it's absolutely a really good point. People with lived experience will pick out things like that because they know, because they're using services, you know, so it's obvious, isn't it? Let's ask people. And when we start at that point, then we might actually get somewhere. But it is a problem. I know with the out of hours art group, it's just difficult to get people to work at weekends. That's the problem. However, you know, now I'm sort of talking to people that say, actually, our buildings aren't being used at weekends. And I think we can start to have those conversations actually with professionals that are suddenly saying, actually, they're not being used. So why don't we start doing something for people at weekends within these buildings? So it might be a bit of watch this space actually for hopefully for this year.
Is the out of hours services, it's just crisis response. There's
Yes.
like in between.
Yeah.
So that's
Just
like
a nice art group or something people can come and chill and just like have a cup of tea. You know, what we're not, and I've spoken about this a lot, we don't measure prevention in that way very well, but actually we know this is really preventative for people, don't we?
I think, again, it's a larger conversation, but yeah, working in healthcare, so often we didn't take time to reflect unless it was an emergency
Yes.
or an incident happened. Like, I worked at one clinic for 2.5 years, and we only started to get staff meetings near the end, and that's because COVID happened and we needed more staff meetings, but also our work we had actually more time, strangely, because everything shifted. But yeah, that was one thing I noticed, that just there is no reflection. And I think, I know that Duncan was really appreciative of that, he was appreciative of the research process for this, that it gave him time to step back and reflect. And you know, I'm appreciative that you guys took time to do that. But yeah, that's one thing he said, was that we just, you know, it's a small charity, you guys don't have a lot of time and money, and so reflection is such a key piece, but we don't do it enough. We don't take time.
That's so true.
It's just response to crisis.
Yeah, very good. I couldn't agree more, actually. But I think we all really enjoyed it. We did. We all really, so we liked coming into that space. And so, you know, like you said, we all regrouped again. We did have sort of various people off sick. And it makes it sound like people are always off sick. They're not at all. It's just that we understand. Yeah, you know. And I always find people with lived experience, you get straight to the point very quickly. There's not lots of spreadsheets or that sort of thing. They're just like, so actually, working wise, it can work really well. So I guess just final thoughts, really. Any final thoughts, Alex, or what's next for Alex, I guess? Do you know, or are you reflecting on that right now?
Thoughts was just like that. The conclusion we came to with the research was that one of the reason that peer-led organizations are really important is because they can serve as places to empower people, and what they do is just sort of do the opposite to stigmatizing. So they welcome people in as opposed to separating people. They view people for who they are as opposed to stereotypes. They trust people, they build relationships, and they create an environment where people can really like thrive and step into the power that they do. So yeah, the sort of the one thing that I theorized was that capital engages in power sharing. So over the course of the last 30 years, they've formalized and organized themselves into a charity, and then through engaging in different expressions of power. So we often think of power as just being dominating, but there's actually different forms. So just coming together as a group of people trying to solve an issue they developed power with, which is like solidarity, that sort of thing. So they engage in a lot of different expressions of power, and they do it ultimately to share power with others, rather than accumulating power to like dominate. They have developed power to then share it with others. And I really saw that. I felt empowered, like I was an outsider, but I felt empowered by the way that I was included and given the opportunity to thrive and show what I had in my skills. And I just saw that in the way that capital staff interact with each other, they interact with their members, and there isn't really like a division. Like, yes, Duncan is the CEO, but he's sitting with members and engaging in them on the same level. He's not like, okay, well, you're a member and then you're a staff and you're this person from the council and all that sort of thing. So I think the main takeaway that I have and about why peer engagement is so important and having user-led is because it can create these environments to empower people. So that's the really important piece. And I think my one argument is for people who maybe don't like people who maybe don't understand the value of drug services or view helping people who use drug or alcohol as sort of like enabling people, that even if you don't agree with harm reduction services, that you should support peer run programs, because it's actually doing what you want people to do, which is empower them and help them to build them up, and that hopefully they're not then struggling with substance use. So that's sort of my one piece, is that even if you don't agree with harm reduction, things like needle exchanges, that sort of thing, you should support peer run in programs and peer engagement, because it actually will empower people to like not do what you think they should do. So yeah, that's my two piece. And then also NHS, you should fund Capital because they're great, but that's a whole other thing.
Excellent, thanks, Alex. And what's next for Alex then? Do you know, or are you in your reflective phase now that we were talking?
I've been reflecting on the experience that I've had the last few months and trying to see, okay, how can I find that? I think that's actually something that I've been thinking about, is because I'm looking for work, and obviously finding a job isn't always perfect, but I've worked for the big institution. I've worked for the health authority, and while I had good experiences like with my clients, I didn't love how the institution ran. And so my reflection was sort of like, okay, I need to try and find something that's similar to Capital, like that peer run or just small charity, something that's actually living their values. Because I had a screensaver at my job when I worked for the health authority that told me that they valued me and lived experience. But like my experience as an employee was that was not what happened. But that was my experience with Capital, that like the values that they have on their website, they actually live those values. So trying to find an environment like that I think will help me be successful for my mental health and just like what I need in terms of a job. So good again, like another empowering and learning moment of like helping me figure out, and I didn't even maybe think this would happen, but like, okay, what's the work environment that I need? I actually need this environment where my lived experience will be valued, and that my life will be valued, that if stuff's happening like in my personal life and it's affecting my work life, I'm not going to be penalized for it or punished or not supported, which was basically my dad died when I was working for the health authority in COVID, and I was not supported. I was not given all the things that Capital had given to me. So I think that's my learning, is trying to find that in employment as much as I can. It's, again, not a perfect world, but that's what I'm trying to find.
That's amazing. Well, we hope you can stay in England. We'd love to have you stay here for sure. And I'm sure Capital will find you a job. I'm sure Capital really want you to come and work for Capital. I know Duncan does for sure.
What about you? Don't they want you to work for you too?
Pardon?
I think I'm gonna join as a trustee.
Well, there we go. Yeah, we're really hoping Alex will join as a trustee, and I'm sure there'll be other things going on. But yeah, thank you so much, Alex. That was amazing. Thank you so much for your work.
You've been listening to Capital Connections. Capital is an independent peer-led charity working across Sussex to amplify lived experience, strengthen peer support and influence how services are designed and delivered. If this conversation resonated with you, you can share this episode, follow or subscribe to the podcast, visit our website to learn more about our work, or get involved in future conversations. We're always looking to hear from people with lived experience, people committed to co-production, and others who want to do things differently. Connection starts with voice, and voice leads to change. Thank you for listening.